Hey everyone, welcome to Chapter Two. Chapter Two is focuses on the founding of the United States, kind of how we got to be where we are. Um, the great thing about this book is that it sort of builds and fortifies a nice foundation to show you how we got started, and then where we go from there. So it sort of tells a story, a history story, if you would, and that's the part that makes it sort of really interesting to me, and I think hopefully to you as well. But many of you don't really realize that, if I were titling this chapter, I probably would have titled it Unintended Consequences. And I would have called it that because the founding of the United States, or how we came to be as a country, was really an unintended consequence. King George, uh, after fighting the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763, uh, when they had finally settled with a treaty, was out of money and decided that the best way to make money was to tax the colonists that were already here in the 13 colonies. Um, and you probably have heard the term taxation without representation, which is what really upset the colonists. We were basically a governorate of Britain at the time, and they were not too thrilled about that. And so they said, the heck with you, we're not going to do this. And after going back and forth with a series of legislative acts on both sides, it results in us going to war. Of course, we win the war, and that's all good for us, bad for King George. But after that point, the question becomes one of, okay, now that you're free, what do you do? Well, you have to set up a system of government, right? A governance. And that's what we had to do. And that's what this chapter is about. So you'll get to talk about and look at um, things like the social contract. What is a social contract? It's a contract between the people and the government, for example. It's not written. It's just basically the premise is that we will give you a certain amount of power over us to be able to lead us in exchange for the social protection of the people. Hence socialism. It's funny people don't like the word socialism, but yet it's the essence of what makes democracy what it is. It's the social protection of the people, not some of the ways people want you to think it is, but that's in essence what it is. You'll also be looking at and talking about the Declaration of Independence, which for us was a Declaration of Independence. For Britain, it was a declaration of war. We'll also look at the Articles of Confederation, which preceded the Constitution. Uh, they was the fastest way to get us up and running as a country, but they realized there were a lot of flaws, and so we developed a new Constitution, which didn't happen overnight. It took about 2.5 years from the first state that ratified it to the last one. There were a lot of issues, and the big issue particularly was slavery. Uh, but we'll also talk about the basis. This is where the idea of how we got, the structure of our system, the idea of federalism, what federalism is, the system that we operate under, and how power is distributed between the various levels of government from the state, from the federal government or the national government, if you would, to the states and then to the local levels. So this sort of lays this all out for you very clearly. Uh, Talks about the very basic principles of the Constitution, and yeah, so this will be where you get started, and we'll show you how we amend the Constitution, the process, uh, which really requires both the Congress, both houses of Congress approval, along with state legislatures. So it's not a simple process, but there is a mechanism to make it happen. So that's chapter two, and I'll see you next at chapter three.